Sir, can I take the leftovers? My mom hasn't eaten all day, said the black girl and started to cry. The studio lights burned hot against Chef Dominic Rayner's forehead as he adjusted his signature purple neckerchief. The finale of America's Next Culinary Star was reaching its climax, and the tension in the air was as thick as the reduction sauce being drizzled onto a contestant's plate. Cameras tracked his every movement like predators, ready to capture any flicker of emotion that might make good television. 3 years hosting the show had taught him exactly how to play to the audience: confident strides, dramatic pauses, and the occasional raised eyebrow that sent viewers into a frenzy on social media. 5 minutes remaining, chefs! Dominic called out, his voice carrying the perfect blend of authority and encouragement that had made him a household name. The 3 finalists, Elena, Marcus, and Jade, moved with frantic precision. They had surpassed 20 other contestants over 12 grueling weeks to reach this moment. The prize, $250,000 and a position as executive chef at Dominic's newest restaurant, Soul and Spice, opening next month in Miami. In the VIP section, food critics from major publications sipped champagne alongside network executives and social media influencers. The event was invitation only, curated to ensure maximum publicity. Dominic had personally approved every name on the guest list. Today's challenge, Dominic had announced earlier, is to create a dish that represents your culinary journey, but with one key ingredient: Louisiana crawfish, the foundation of my own success story. The crawfish was no accident. It was the cornerstone of the sweet heat gumbo that had launched Dominic from obscurity in New Orleans to stardom in Los Angeles 15 years ago. That dish, spicy, complex, and hauntingly memorable, had become his signature creation, the recipe he guarded most jealously. Sandra Morton, the head judge and respected food critic, leaned toward Dominic. "You seem tense tonight. Everything all right?" "Just ensuring perfection," he replied, flashing the smile that graced 6 cookbook covers and countless magazine features. At 42, Dominic had built an empire on his soul fusion cuisine, traditional black Southern cooking elevated with global techniques and ingredients. His life story, rising from poverty in the 9th Ward to becoming the most recognizable black chef in America, was marketing gold. What the cameras didn't capture was how his hands trembled slightly as he checked his phone. 3 missed calls from his business manager and a text. "Journalists sniffing around your New Orleans days. Call ASAP." Dominic shoved the phone into his pocket as the countdown clock hit 0. "Time! Utensils down!" he announced, his voice betraying none of his inner turmoil. One by one, the contestants presented their creations. Elena's crawfish bisque with saffron foam. Marcus's crawfish étouffee spring rolls. Jade's crawfish stuffed ravioli with bourbon brown butter. The judges tasted each dish with theatrical deliberation. Cameras zoomed in on Dominic's face as he sampled Jade's ravioli, capturing his momentary pause and subtle nod that fans would analyze frame by frame later. "Before we begin scoring," Sandra said, "let's acknowledge the incredible journey these 3 chefs." A commotion near the catering area cut her off. The cameras swiveled instinctively. A small figure had slipped past security. A young black girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old, in a faded blue dress with hastily braided hair, stood beside the buffet table where staff meals were being prepared apart from the competition food. "Sir," she said to a startled catering assistant, her voice quavering but clear enough to be picked up by a nearby boom mic. "Can I take the leftovers? My mom hasn't eaten all day." The assistant, a young man with a bewildered expression, looked around frantically for guidance. The girl's eyes welled with tears that she tried valiantly to blink away. "I'm sorry, but you can't be here, sweetheart," the assistant said gently, but loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "This is a closed set." "Please," the girl whispered, a single tear escaping down her cheek. "She's sick. She used to cook real good food." The studio fell into an uncomfortable silence. The kind of raw, unscripted moment that producers dreamed of but publicists dreaded. Dominic, who had been midway through his critique of Jade's dish, froze. Something about the girl's voice had penetrated his practiced persona. He turned slowly, his fork still suspended in midair. "What's your name?" he called out, forcing a kindly tone that didn't match the sudden pallor of his face. The girl looked up, startled to be addressed by the famous chef she'd clearly recognized. "Imani," she said, her voice small but clear in the hushed studio. The color drained entirely from Dominic's face. The fork clattered to the table, splattering brown butter sauce onto his immaculate white chef's jacket. Not because of the interrupted finale. Not because of the security breach. But because 15 years ago, he had known only one person who had planned to give that name to her daughter. "Imani," he repeated, the name catching in his throat like a fish bone. The cameras captured his expression, a mixture of shock and what appeared to be recognition, though no one else in the room understood why. No one except Dominic, who was staring at a ghost from his past, embodied in the features of a child who looked exactly like the woman he had left behind on his climb to the top. The woman whose recipes had built his empire. "Cut to commercial!" The director's voice pierced through the stunned silence. The red recording lights on the cameras blinked off, but the tension in the room remained electric. Production assistants rushed toward Imani while the show's crisis manager hurried to Dominic's side. Contestants exchanged bewildered glances as the judges huddled together in whispered consultation. "Chef, we need to resume filming in 3 minutes," the crisis manager insisted. "Should we have security remove the child?" Dominic wasn't listening. His gaze remained fixed on Imani as a heavy-set security guard gently guided her toward the exit. The girl looked over her shoulder, her eyes briefly meeting Dominic's before she disappeared behind a door. "No," Dominic said suddenly, his voice carrying across the set. "Nobody touches that girl. Find out where she lives. And get her some food, a lot of it." He pulled the head producer aside, speaking in a low, urgent tone. "I need 5 minutes. Personal emergency." Without waiting for a response, Dominic strode off the set, loosening his purple neckerchief as he found refuge in his private dressing room. Once alone, he splashed cold water on his face and stared at his reflection in the mirror. "It can't be," he whispered to himself. But memory transported him back 15 years, to a cramped, chaotic kitchen in New Orleans' 7th Ward. The Creole Pot had been a hole-in-the-wall restaurant with peeling paint and unreliable plumbing, but its kitchen had been sacred ground. And Alicia Moore had been its high priestess. "You're not getting the balance right, Dominic," Alicia had said, her slender brown fingers adjusting the heat under his pot. At 32, she had been 8 years his senior and infinitely more talented, a fact he'd readily admitted back then. The heat needs to build slowly, like a good jazz number. In his memory, Alicia's smile was radiant despite the exhaustion that seemed permanently etched around her eyes. A single mother working 60-hour weeks, she'd taken young, ambitious Dominic under her wing when no one else would give him a chance. "I'm going to be famous one day," he told her during those late nights when they experimented with recipes after closing. "We both are. We'll open our own place in LA, maybe write a cookbook." "Famous, huh?" She'd laughed, stirring her gumbo with the precision of a chemist. "Just remember where you came from when that happens." The recipe that would eventually make him famous, sweet heat gumbo, had been her creation. The perfect marriage of traditional techniques and bold innovation. When food critics had first tasted it, they'd been transported, calling it revolutionary and a masterclass in balanced complexity. "My grandmother used to say food remembers the hands that made it," Alicia had told him while teaching him her recipe. "Put love in it, and people will taste the difference." A sharp knock on the dressing room door yanked Dominic back to the present. 2 minutes, chef," a production assistant called out. Dominic took a deep breath and straightened his jacket. When he returned to set, the atmosphere had shifted. The competition judges looked uneasy. Sandra's perfectly plucked eyebrows were knitted in concern. "Everything all right?" she asked as the makeup artist hastily powdered his forehead. "Fine," Dominic replied curtly. "Where's the girl?" "The head of catering gave her a boxed meal," Sandra said. "Security escorted her out." The network doesn't want this incident on air. They're deleting the footage. Dominic nodded, relieved yet troubled. As the director counted down to resume filming, his phone vibrated in his pocket. He discreetly checked the message. Girl lives at Westlake Apartments, Unit 3C, 2 blocks from here. Mother's name, Alicia Moore. His suspicions confirmed, Dominic felt the ground shift beneath him. 15 years ago, after receiving an offer from a Los Angeles talent agent, he had taken copies of Alicia's recipes, including the game-changing gumbo, and disappeared without a word. The single most cowardly act of his life. By the time his first television special aired, he had rewritten history. This gumbo recipe has been in my family for generations, he'd told millions of viewers with practiced sincerity. My grandmother taught me how soul food is about honoring our ancestors through flavor. That fabricated grandmother had become a cornerstone of his brand, a fictional matriarch whose wisdom he quoted regularly in interviews. Meanwhile, the real culinary genius who had taught him everything remained in New Orleans, forgotten and uncredited. We're live in 3, 2, 1. The red lights blinked on, and Dominic transformed back into the charismatic host America adored. But his mind raced as he announced the winner, Elena, though he barely registered her tearful acceptance speech. Standing there under the hot lights, his empire suddenly felt as hollow as an empty pot. All those interviews, television appearances, and cookbook signing tours, built on recipes that carried another woman's soul. And now, her daughter had walked into his carefully constructed world, innocently demolishing its foundation with 7 simple words. Sir, can I take the leftovers? My mom hasn't eaten all day. Imani clutched the cardboard box of food to her chest as she made her way down the littered sidewalk. The head of catering, a kind-eyed woman named Marissa, had filled it with far more than leftovers, perfectly plated contest dishes, freshly baked rolls, and even a slice of chocolate cake wrapped separately with, for Imani, written on the napkin. Come back if you need more. Marissa had whispered, slipping a $20 bill into Imani's pocket when the security guards weren't looking. What Imani didn't notice was the woman following her at a distance. Maya Winters, a 28-year-old junior producer for the show, had been captivated by the raw authenticity of the girl's interruption, a moment of real life puncturing the carefully scripted reality television bubble. The segment's ruined, her supervisor had complained. We'll have to re-edit the whole ending. But Maya had seen something else, the unmistakable recognition on Chef Rayner's face when the girl said her name. The story instinct that had earned her journalism degree before she'd settled for reality TV production tingled at the base of her skull. Imani turned into the Westlake Apartments, a once decent complex now crumbling from neglect. Graffiti decorated the ground floor, and several windows were patched with cardboard. The jarring contrast, this building standing just 2 blocks from a multi-million-dollar television production, made Maya pause. She waited until Imani disappeared inside before approaching the building. The security door hung ajar, its lock long broken. From inside the lobby, Maya could see the elevator with an "out of order" sign. She watched as Imani began the climb to the 3rd floor. This is ridiculous, Maya muttered to herself. I could lose my job for this. Yet she found herself following anyway, maintaining a discreet distance as Imani reached the 3rd floor and walked to apartment 3C. The girl knocked, a peculiar pattern of 3 quick taps, a pause, then 2 more, before using a key to let herself in. Maya hesitated in the hallway. The ethical line she was crossing loomed large in her mind, but curiosity pushed her forward. She approached the door, noticing the peeling paint and a small, withered plant outside, evidence of someone trying to create beauty in a decaying environment. The door was thin enough that voices carried. Maya heard Imani speaking excitedly. Mommy, you won't believe where I got this food. The fancy TV show kitchen. And I met him, the chef from your old pictures. A weaker voice responded, too soft for Maya to make out the words. She leaned closer, then startled as a neighbor emerged from a nearby apartment. The woman gave Maya a suspicious look before continuing down the hallway. Maya made a split-second decision. She knocked on the door. After a long pause, it opened a crack, secured by a chain. Imani peered out, her expression shifting from hope to confusion. "You're from the TV show," the girl said, recognition dawning. "I am," Maya admitted. "I just wanted to make sure you got home okay." "Why?" The direct question from the child left Maya momentarily speechless. Before she could formulate a response, the door closed. Maya heard hushed conversation, then the sound of the chains sliding free. The door reopened wider. A thin woman stood behind Imani, one hand resting on the girl's shoulder. Despite her gaunt appearance and the dark circles under her eyes, Alicia Moore's beauty remained evident. The resemblance between mother and daughter was striking, the same deep brown eyes, high cheekbones, and determined set of the jaw. "You're not from Child Services, are you?" Alicia asked, her voice hoarse but dignified. "No, ma'am. I work on Chef Rayner's show." Alicia's expression hardened at the mention of his name. "Well, we thank you for the food, but we don't need charity." "It's not charity," Maya said quickly. "Actually, I was hoping to talk to you. Professionally." Alicia studied her with wary eyes. "About what?" "About cooking," Maya said. It wasn't entirely a lie. "May I come in?" "Just for a few minutes." After a moment's hesitation, Alicia stepped aside. The apartment was small and sparsely furnished, but impeccably clean. What immediately caught Maya's eye was the bookshelf in the corner, loaded not with novels but with worn notebooks and 3 published cookbooks with Chef Rayner's face on the covers. On the coffee table lay an open notebook, the page covered in elegant handwriting, recipe modifications and notes about spice combinations. Beside it sat a stack of medical bills stamped "Final Notice." Maya glanced at the tiny kitchen area where Imani was carefully unpacking the food container. On the counter stood several small bottles of prescription medication. "Lupus," Alicia said, following Maya's gaze. "Makes it hard to work regular hours in a restaurant kitchen. The flare-ups come without warning." She gestured to a threadbare armchair. "So, what did you want to talk about?" Maya sat down, her mind racing. Through the open bedroom door, she could see a mattress on the floor with a colorful quilt, handmade, by the look of it, and more notebooks stacked beside it. "Those notebooks," Maya began carefully. "Are they recipes?" Alicia's eyes narrowed slightly. "My life's work. Been developing recipes since I was 16. Used to be head cook at the Creole Pot before it closed down." Maya reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. She opened the photo gallery to an image she'd saved months ago for a potential segment, a handwritten recipe for sweet heat gumbo from Chef Rayner's first cookbook, displayed in a glass case at his flagship restaurant as the recipe that started it all. "Ms. Moore," Maya said, turning the phone toward her. "Have you ever seen this handwriting before?" Alicia took the phone, her hands trembling slightly. For a long moment she stared at the image. When she looked up, her eyes were filled with a complex mixture of pain and vindication. "That," she said quietly, "is my handwriting." 6 hours after the competition finale wrapped, Dominic sat alone in his hotel suite, still in his chef's whites, an untouched glass of bourbon on the side table. His phone wouldn't stop buzzing, congratulatory messages about the show's record ratings, his agent discussing a new endorsement deal, and 3 increasingly urgent texts from his publicist. "Call me ASAP. Junior producer asking questions about New Orleans. Not going away." The knock on his door came at 11:47 p.m. When he opened it, Sandra Morton stood in the hallway, still dressed in her judge's attire but with her camera-ready smile replaced by a look of grave concern. "We need to talk," she said, stepping past him without waiting for an invitation. She placed her tablet on the coffee table and pulled up a social media post that had been published 20 minutes earlier. Dominic felt his stomach drop as he read the headline on the food blog Taste Tracker. "Is America's Soul Food King a culinary con artist?" Beneath it was an image of 2 recipe pages side by side, his published sweet heat gumbo recipe next to a handwritten version with nearly identical instructions. The caption read, "Left, Chef Rayner's family recipe. Right, Alicia Moore's original creation from 15 years ago. # culinary theft trending." I've known you for a decade, Sandra said, her voice uncharacteristically gentle. Tell me this isn't what it looks like. Dominic sank into a chair, the carefully constructed narrative of his career crumbling around him. Who published this? Someone called Maya Winters, junior producer on your show. Sandra scrolled through the post. She has more evidence she's threatening to release, photographs of dozens of recipes, testimonies from former New Orleans colleagues. How long do I have? Hours, not days. The network is already in emergency meetings. As if on cue, Dominic's phone rang, his agent again. He silenced it. That girl today, Sandra said. Imani. She's Alicia Moore's daughter, isn't she? Dominic nodded, unable to speak the truth aloud even now. Jesus, Dom. Sandra's disappointment cut deeper than anger would have. What happened between you two? I was 24, desperate to make it, he said, the justification sounding hollow even to his own ears. Alicia was brilliant but tied down with a baby on the way. When the talent scout offered me a spot on that first cooking special, I took her recipe book. Told myself I'd send for her once I got established. But you didn't. The network wanted a brand. A story. The grandmother angle tested better with focus groups than taught by another chef. He rubbed his temples. By the time my first cookbook came out, the lie was too big to take back. Sandra's phone chimed with a news alert. She checked it, her expression darkening. It's hitting mainstream now. CNN just picked it up. Outside the hotel, Dominic spotted the first news van pulling up. His empire wouldn't survive the night. Across town, Alicia's apartment had transformed into an impromptu command center. Maya sat on the floor surrounded by notebooks, photographing pages and comparing them to published recipes from Dominic's cookbooks. A food blogger had joined them via video call, verifying the authenticity of the handwriting and cross-referencing dates. 93% of his original recipes appear in your notebooks first, Maya said, looking up at Alicia. That's beyond coincidence. That's theft. Alicia, who had been quiet throughout much of the process, smoothed her hand over one of the oldest notebooks. I never wrote these thinking they'd make somebody else famous. Imani watched from the kitchen counter where she was supposed to be doing homework but had instead been listening intently. Is Chef Rainer a bad person, Mommy? The question hung in the air. Alicia's answer, when it came, surprised Maya. No, baby. Dominic made bad choices, but he wasn't always bad. She turned to a page in the notebook and showed Imani a faded photograph tucked inside, a much younger Dominic and Alicia laughing in a kitchen, flour dusting their aprons. He used to talk about us opening a restaurant together. Dreams change, I guess. Maya's phone buzzed. The story's everywhere now, she said, scanning headlines. The network wants an official statement from you. I don't want to destroy him, Alicia said quietly. He stole your life's work, Maya countered. You deserve recognition, compensation. And what happens when the cameras leave? When this isn't trending anymore? Alicia gestured around the apartment. I'm still a single mom with a chronic illness and no job security. The buzzer for the apartment rang, startling everyone. Maya checked the security camera feed on her phone and froze. It's him, she said. Dominic Rainer is downstairs. Alicia and Maya exchanged a long look. Finally, Alicia nodded. Let him up. When Dominic stepped into the apartment, the room fell silent. He looked smaller somehow, without the lights and cameras, his expression haunted. His eyes found Alicia first, then darted to Imani before settling on the notebooks spread across the floor, physical evidence of his deception. You shouldn't have come here, Maya said coldly. I needed to see her, Dominic replied, his gaze returning to Alicia. Before it all falls apart. Alicia studied him, 15 years of unspoken words passing between them. You look tired, Dominic. I just taped my career's funeral, he said with a bitter laugh. The network's cutting ties. The restaurant group is reconsidering our relationship. The cookbook publisher wants their advance back. Good, Maya muttered. But Alicia's expression remained complex, unreadable. She gestured for Imani to come to her side and placed her hands on her daughter's shoulders. "This is who you left behind," she said simply. "When you took my recipes, you also walked out on your daughter." The revelation hit like a physical blow. Dominic staggered back, his gaze darting between Alicia and Imani, seeing now what should have been obvious from the first moment. The girl had his mother's eyes, his own jawline. "My daughter?" he whispered, the final piece of his carefully constructed identity shattering completely. The morning after Dominic's world imploded, the network hastily arranged a press conference to address the scandal. Under the harsh lights of the hotel ballroom, a sea of reporters waited, digital recorders and cameras poised like weapons. Dominic stood backstage, a shell of the confident personality America had come to admire. A makeup artist made a futile attempt to conceal his sleepless night, while the network's crisis manager reviewed talking points with him. "Stick to the script," she instructed, handing him a carefully worded statement. "Express regret for any confusion regarding recipe attribution. Don't admit liability. Emphasize your inspiration from working with many talented chefs throughout your career." Dominic scanned the document, his mind elsewhere. The revelation that Imani was his daughter had left him reeling. After his initial shock in Alicia's apartment, he had managed only a few stunted questions before Maya had firmly asked him to leave. "You've lost the right to answers tonight," the junior producer had said. "You can talk to your lawyers tomorrow." But Alicia had walked him to the door, and in a quiet moment had told him, "I found out I was pregnant a week after you left. I tried to call. Your number was disconnected." Now, minutes before facing the media, his phone buzzed with a text from Sandra. "They're here. Back row left side." Dominic peered through the curtain. In the last row of chairs sat Alicia, pale but composed, with Imani beside her. Maya occupied the seat next to them, her expression watchful. Their presence sent a ripple of anxiety through him, witnesses to his greatest deception and most personal failure. 30 seconds, the stage manager announced. Dominic folded the prepared statement and slipped it into his pocket. For the first time in 15 years, he was about to go off script. When he stepped to the podium, camera flashes erupted like lightning strikes. He stood silently, allowing the moment to stretch uncomfortably long. Reporters shifted in their seats. A technician adjusted a microphone, the feedback whine cutting through the tension. "I've built my career on a lie," Dominic finally said, his voice barely audible. The crisis manager stepped forward, but Dominic waved her off. "I've been asked to read a statement expressing regret for any confusion regarding recipe attribution." He continued, drawing the paper from his pocket and deliberately tearing it in half. "But there was no confusion. There was theft. Calculated, deliberate theft of another chef's intellectual property. Her name is Alicia Moore, and without her, Chef Dominic Rayner would not exist." The room erupted. Reporters shouted questions, photographers lunged forward, and network executives whispered frantically into phones. Through the chaos, Dominic sought out Alicia's eyes in the back of the room. She sat motionless, her expression unreadable, one arm wrapped protectively around Imani. "The sweet heat gumbo that launched my career was Alicia's creation," Dominic continued, his voice gaining strength. "So was the blackened catfish with mango salsa from my first cookbook. The Bourbon Street bread pudding that won the James Beard Award. All of it, her recipes, her techniques, her culinary vision." He gripped the edges of the podium, steadying himself. "I've talked for years about my grandmother's influence on my cooking. That was a marketing strategy created by the network. My actual grandmother couldn't boil water without burning it." A ripple of uncomfortable laughter moved through the room. "The truth is, everything I know about soul food, about respecting ingredients and honoring tradition through innovation, I learned from Alicia Moore in a rundown kitchen in New Orleans." The crisis manager was now frantically signaling for security to remove him from the stage. Dominic spoke faster. 15 years ago, I made a choice. A talent scout offered me a television opportunity, but only for me, not for the unknown pregnant chef I worked with. I told myself it was temporary, that I'd bring Alicia into the fold once I had power. But success is seductive, and lies compound. Each cookbook, each show, each restaurant opening took me further from the truth, until I couldn't find my way back. His voice broke. In the silence that followed, a single question cut through the room. Did you know you had a daughter? All heads turned to find the source, a veteran food columnist from the New York Times, her expression shrewd and penetrating. Dominic closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, they were wet with tears. No, he said quietly. I didn't know until last night. But my ignorance doesn't excuse my absence. In the back row, Imani stared at him with wide, solemn eyes that, as Alicia had pointed out, mirrored his mother's. The weight of missed birthdays, school events, and bedtime stories pressed down on him with crushing force. I don't expect forgiveness, Dominic continued. But I want to make one thing absolutely clear. Alicia Moore is the most talented chef I've ever known. She created the recipes that made me famous while raising our daughter alone, struggling with lupus, and working jobs that were beneath her extraordinary abilities. That stops today. With trembling hands, he removed his signature purple neckerchief, the one that had become his brand's logo, emblazoned on everything from cookware to aprons. I'm stepping down from Rainer Restaurant Group, effective immediately. I'm transferring 30% ownership to Alicia Moore, along with all creative control. Additionally, I'm establishing a culinary scholarship in her name at the New Orleans Culinary Institute. The room had fallen completely silent. Every cookbook I've published will be revised to correctly attribute each recipe to its true creator. And all future royalties will go directly to Alicia and Imani. As security finally approached to escort him from the podium, Dominic looked directly at the cameras. To the culinary world, I apologize for my deception. To Alicia, I'm sorry for stealing your dreams. And to Imani, his voice caught. I hope someday you'll let me know you, even though I've given you no reason to want that. As he stepped away from the microphone, the room exploded into chaos. Reporters shouted questions, photographers scrambled for better angles, and network executives hurried to damage control huddles. But through the pandemonium, Dominic kept his eyes on Alicia and Imani, watching as his daughter leaned up to whisper something in her mother's ear. Whatever she said made Alicia smile, a brief, fragile thing, before she took Imani's hand and stood, making her way not toward the exit, but through the crowd, moving steadily in his direction. 6 months after the press conference that shattered Chef Dominic Rainer's carefully constructed world, the corner of Frenchman and Marigny streets in New Orleans hummed with anticipation. A line stretched down the block, food critics, local families, and curious tourists all waiting for the grand opening of Imani's Table. The restaurant occupied a lovingly restored Victorian building with floor-to-ceiling windows and a wraparound porch adorned with hanging ferns. The sign above the entrance featured hand-painted lettering and a small purple neckerchief icon in the corner, a nod to complicated history. Inside, Alicia Moore moved through the kitchen with quiet authority, her health visibly improved. The lupus was still there, but with proper treatment, afforded by the settlement money, and a more manageable work schedule, the flare-ups had become less frequent. She paused at each station, tasting sauces, adjusting seasonings, and offering guidance to the staff with the confidence of someone who had always belonged in charge. The Times food critic just arrived, said Maya, who had left television production to become the restaurant's marketing director. Her exposé on Dominic had earned her a James Beard Journalism nomination, but she'd found more satisfaction in helping build something new than in tearing down the old. Alicia nodded unfazed. He'll get the same food as everyone else. In the dining room, Imani sat at a corner table, carefully folding purple cloth napkins into elaborate shapes for the evening's service. At 9 years old, she wasn't legally allowed to work in the restaurant, but she'd insisted on contributing. School afternoons found her doing homework in the office, weekends helping with simple prep tasks, absorbing the rhythm of restaurant life. The kitchen doors swung open as Dominic entered, carrying a crate of heirloom tomatoes from the urban farm he'd started on the outskirts of the city. Gone were the designer clothes and camera-ready smile, replaced by worn jeans and the weathered look of a man who spent his days in the sun. He set the crate down and wiped his brow with the back of his hand. "These are the last of the summer crop," he told Alicia. "The fall plantings are coming in strong, though." Their interaction was cordial but measured, professional colleagues rather than friends, certainly not romantic partners. The journey from betrayal to working relationship had been arduous, fraught with lawyers, therapists, and painful conversations. Dominic had surrendered more than the legal settlement required, liquidating assets to fund the restaurant and Imani's education trust. For Alicia, forgiveness hadn't come easily. "I'm not doing this for you," she told him bluntly during the restaurant planning. "I'm doing it because it's the kitchen I always deserved to run." For Dominic, acceptance of his diminished role had been equally challenging. The man who had commanded culinary empires now grew vegetables, made deliveries, and occasionally helped with prep work, always under Alicia's direction, never in front of cameras. Imani looked up as Dominic approached her table. "You're doing those better than I ever could," he said, nodding at the napkins. "Mom says I have an eye for detail," she replied with the matter-of-fact wisdom of children. Their relationship remained the most delicate work in progress. Dominic had missed 8 years of her life, a gap that couldn't be filled with belated gifts or forced bonding. Supervised visits had gradually expanded to weekend activities, but Imani maintained a careful emotional distance, studying her biological father with watchful eyes. "Want to see something?" Dominic asked, pulling a small notebook from his back pocket. "I've been working on a new recipe. Thought maybe we could test it together sometime." Imani accepted the notebook, flipping through pages of his messy handwriting, ingredient lists, technique notes, and margin sketches for plating designs. "Maybe," she said, not committing but not refusing, progress of sorts. The front doors opened as the staff welcomed the first customers. Among them was Sandra Morton, no longer just a television judge but now an investor in Imani's table. "This place is going to put New Orleans back on the culinary map," she declared, embracing Alicia. "And this time, with the right chef getting the credit." As the dining room filled, Alicia returned to the kitchen to orchestrate the evening service. Dominic occupied his designated position at the guard manger station, preparing cold appetizers under the direction of a chef half his age. His fall from celebrity had been spectacular, late-night comedy fodder, a cautionary tale in culinary schools, the subject of a forthcoming documentary. Yet watching Alicia command the kitchen he denied her for 15 years, Dominic felt something unexpected: relief. The constant performance, the fear of exposure, the hollow accolades for someone else's talent, all gone. In their place was simpler work with tangible results: tomatoes that grew under his care, dishes assembled with his hands, and occasionally, the solemn nod of approval from his daughter. Near closing time, as the last customers lingered over dessert, Alicia emerged from the kitchen to mingle with guests. The signature dish of the night, a reimagined sweet heat gumbo, had earned particular praise. A food blogger asked about its origin. "It's evolved over 20 years," Alicia explained, her voice carrying across the room. "The base recipe was something I created back when I was head cook at the Creole Pot." She paused, then added something that surprised even Dominic. "But tonight's version includes a smoked paprika technique that Dominic contributed. In this kitchen, we believe good food remembers all the hands that touched it." Later, as staff cleaned and prepped for the next day, Imani sat at the counter watching Alicia adjust recipes in her notebook. The same elegant handwriting that had once been stolen now proudly displayed on the restaurant's menu. "Are you still mad at him?" Imani asked suddenly. Alicia considered the question carefully. "Not as much as I was," she answered honestly. "Anger takes too much energy, and I need mine for cooking. And for you." Imani nodded, absorbing this adult wisdom. "He's teaching me how to grow tomatoes," she offered. "He says I have your touch with plants." Alicia smiled, recognizing the small olive branch her daughter was extending. "You know what my grandmother used to say? Healing and cooking work the same way. You can't rush either one if you want good results." As they prepared to leave, Dominic approached with a tentative expression. The urban farming program called, he said. They want Imani to see the school gardens tomorrow, if that's okay. Can I go, Mom? Imani asked. Alicia nodded, watching as her daughter's face brightened. None of this had been easy, and the path forward remained uncertain. But in this moment, in this restored kitchen where credit was finally given where due, she allowed herself to acknowledge a simple truth. Sometimes, the most complex recipes yielded the most satisfying results, even when the ingredients included past betrayals and delayed justice. We'll pick you up at 3, Alicia told Dominic, then turned to her daughter. Come on, chef in training. Tomorrow's another big day. As they walked out together, Imani looked back at Dominic and offered a small wave, not forgiveness exactly, but possibility. In the warm glow of the restaurant that bore her name, that seemed enough for now.